Hello. In this video, the third in a series of videos on diagramming, we're going to talk about three different kinds of verbals. We'll talk briefly about noun clauses, and lastly we'll talk about independent elements in sentences. So first, let's talk about the three verbals. Verbals can be some of the most complicated elements to diagram. Gerunds, participles, and infinitives are your three verbals. Gerunds are the easiest of those three because they come in only one form, which is a verb stem, so something looks like a verb, plus ing. And they do only one kind of thing. They function as nouns. When you diagram a gerund, you place it on a stair-like structure like this, regardless of where the gerund occurs. Remember that gerunds, because they retain some of the properties of a verb, can have objects, and you will place the object of a gerund on a line, on the line the gerund is on, after a short vertical line that does not go through the horizontal line. In this example, the gerund is functioning as the direct object. The gerund phrase is functioning as the direct object. Let's look at a sentence. Sam loves running bases. Well, the sentence, the verb is loves, right? Sam is the subject, we understand that. But the idea here is not that Sam loves bases or that Sam loves running. It is this particular and specific kind of running that he loves. And running here, it is a verb stem followed by ing, and bases is the object of running. And so you diagram the whole gerund phrase on a pedestal in the direct object position. Another example here, I put the sentence down here for space, but loving the right things is an indication of spiritual maturity. Well, what's your verb? Of course, your verb here is, right? When you say what is, well, loving the right things is. And then is what? An indication of spiritual maturity. So let's look at what that sentence will look like. If you want to pause the video before I bring it up and attempt to diagram this on your own, it would be good practice. But here we go. Here you have it. So the gerund phrase, gerund clause is actually in the subject position, loving things, and is the right things, is indication. Indication here is a predicate, a nominative, and then you modify that with an, and with the prepositional phrase of maturity. Spiritual is telling us what kind of maturity. It's spiritual maturity that loving the right things indicates. So that's your sentence diagrammed there. And just another verbal here. In this case, the gerund is functioning as the object of a preposition. The devil deceived Eve by lying. Well, by is a prepositional phrase. Lying is the object of the preposition, even though it is a gerund. It is a gerund because you have the form of lie. It's changed because you have the suffix, but ing still added on there. So lying is a gerund functioning here as the object of the preposition. Participles are your second kind of verbal, and they can be identified because they're a verb stem that then ends in ing, d, ed, t, or en. They always function as adjectives, and they should be diagrammed similar to how the gerund would be diagrammed, but you put the participle on the line as it comes down. It should go over where the slanted line and the horizontal line meet. You kind of write the letters on a curve there, and then you have a divider on the horizontal line between the participle and an object, if there is an object of the participle, which you have in this case here. Singing a song, she walked along. So along is saying how she walked, but singing is modifying she in this case. Moving on then. Infinitives are easy to recognize because they always have a to in front of them. The to always occurs in front of them. The infinitive has three parts: the infinitive marker to, the verb form that comes after the to, and often there's an object of the infinitive. You should have a line then. This would be your subject-verb divider line, because this whole infinitive phrase in this case is functioning as the subject of the sentence. Let's look at an example. To love God is the greatest commandment. To love God is your infinitive, is your verb, of course, and commandment is the predicate nominative, modified by greatest and modified by the. Another example of an infinitive here. God wanted Moses to lead his people well. So you can try and diagram that on your own. Your verb is wanted, right? Your subject is God, and so that gives you God wanted. If you ask your direct object question, God wanted what? Well, the answer would be Moses to lead his people well. The whole thing here is, in fact, a clause that's functioning, or a phrase that's functioning as the direct object. So here would be an example. God wanted Moses to lead his people well. Here's an example where you actually have a subject for the infinitive and an object for the infinitive. So these infinitives can be problematic in that they can have many different parts added on to them. Here's another example of infinitive. The fruit looked good enough to make one wise. Here, the infinitive is functioning adverbially, modifying enough. So everything else there I think is straightforward, but this is good is modified by enough. Enough is modified by to make one, and then wise modifies one. A noun clause can be some of the trickiest clauses to master in diagrams because they can show up in so many places and often without warning. They usually start with a relative pronoun or a noun clause identifier like that. Sometimes, like in this sentence, there is no warning. So here I hope the examples are helpful. The examples are helpful is a noun clause. I hope. Hope is your verb. I is your subject. And you ask, I hope what, right? And you do have a direct object. But in this case, the direct object is a noun clause. There is no verbal in here. This is just a noun with a verb and a predicate adjective. And so it's a simple clause, but the clause is actually functioning as a noun. And so once those start stacking up on each other, your diagrams can get very complicated. We also, in our sentences, sometimes have independent elements. There's two main kinds of independent elements. These typically are either interjections or nouns of direct address. In this case, you have a noun of direct address. John closed the door. John is being addressed directly. You might be tempted to think that John is the subject, but he is not. This is why it is so important to ask the question, what is the verb first? As the verb here is close, right? So who is to close? Well, John cannot function as the subject because John is being addressed here. You need a different subject. And so in this case, you have an understood you, the same as you often have in questions or in commands. John, as an independent element, is diagrammed on a line off by himself or itself, in the case of the word. So John, noun of direct address, off by itself. You, the subject, close. The verb door, the direct object, the, is modifying door. The other kind of independent element is a exclamation of some kind. And so, boy, I love diagramming. Boy here is not a noun of direct address. Boy is an expression. It's an interjection expressing great ecstatic joy. And the whole sentence then, the actual sentence is, I love diagramming. That's it for our third video. In these 3 videos, we've covered all of the major elements that you will encounter when you diagram. I hope they prove helpful. Let me know if you have any questions or suggestions. Thank you.